My dear students, I am Mr. Emmanuel Chaz from Edukea Tanzania. Today let us enjoy our session, Civics. Our topic is poverty. Today we want to learn the concept of poverty, types of poverty, indicator of poverty, causes of poverty, and the way how poverty can be eradicated from Tanzania and the world at large. When we talk about poverty, we say this is the situation whereby a person is unable to afford their basic needs such as food, shelter, clothes at the individual level. So, my dear students, poverty, as it is written on the chalkboard, is a situation whereby a person is unable to afford the basic needs such as food, shelter, clothes, and the other basic necessities of the human life. Therefore, poverty has categorized into two types, which are namely absolute poverty, relative poverty. So this poverty has two types. The first type is absolute poverty. When you talk about absolute poverty, means it refers to the insufficiency of resources to the extent that a person lives below the standard fit for human being. So, absolute poverty, this is the types of poverty whereby an individual himself or herself live in a poor situation or live under the standard of living and is an insufficiency of the different resources to the extent that a person lives below to the standard. This means that a person cannot afford to get all of the basic needs. That is what we call absolute poverty. Take an example. In most of our Tanzanian communities or Tanzanian families, our parents does not give us all of the necessities of our human life. We do not get quality education, we don't get balanced diet, and the other necessities. So this is what we call absolute poverty. Then another type is relative poverty. When you talk about relative poverty, means is a situation whereby an individual or a nation are somehow able to get some of their basic needs. This means that these types explain the way how a person is unable to get the basic needs, but not to the maximum, it is to the minimum. And if it is to the national level, even the national level does not provide the oral services to his citizens, but few of the services are provided, like water supplies, schools, and the other basic needs for the human life. So therefore, apart from relative poverty, so this, when you learn about these two types of poverty, you see that there is a slight difference between these two types of poverty. But each is a type of poverty, but there is a little slight difference according to explanation here below. Also, let us see the levels of poverty. Poverty have classified in two levels. The first level is individual level. The next is the national level. By starting with this individual level, This is a situation whereby an individual is unable to get the basic needs such as shelter, food, clothes, transport, and etc. So, poverty at individual level has caused the problems of this person to fail even to afford to get the oral necessities of the human life, especially food, shelter, clothes, and the other basic needs. So, in case of individual level, poverty is still a problem because it makes people to live under extreme poverty or under extreme condition of the human life, of which they do not get even the balanced diet. Because here, as you see, people does not get food. So if a people fail even to get food, this means that people live under extreme poverty. Next level of poverty is national level. When you talk about national level, at the level of poverty, it refers to the situation whereby a country or a nation is unable to supply the services to their people such as education, infrastructure, food, health service, clean water, and etc. Therefore, after looking levels of poverty to the individual level, so now we have to look at the national level. National level, this means a country or a nation cannot afford to provide all of the services. And such services are like schools or education, institutions, infrastructure, foods, health services, and the clean water. So if a nation fail to provide these services to the citizens, this implies that this country or this nation is poor because the nation has failed to afford the basic needs to the citizens. So my dear students, after looking from the definition to the types of poverty and the levels of poverty, so now you should be able to identify types of poverty, levels of poverty, and what is poverty. You can explain what is poverty, and you should be able to differentiate the difference between individual level and the national level. That is can be the indication of you that you have understood what is the meaning of poverty. So after looking at that, therefore, let us see the indicators of poverty. Let us see the indicators of poverty in any nations. First points which show that there is poverty in any country or any nations is low per capita income. Low per capita income, this is the first indicator of poverty in any nations. And when you talk about low per capita income, this means every individual in a country could possess an amount of money. But here, low per capita income means that income that owned by a certain person is very low. It's not enough to run the daily lives. So this implies that there is poverty. The second point is low level of science and technology. In most developing nations, science and technology is still a problem, whereby the nations does not use higher science and technology, but still use the low science and technology because of failing to afford some amount of money to purchase higher machines and to improve their technologies. Instead, they depend to the external countries, like from the Western countries. Those are developed countries. So most of the developing countries depend from the Western countries, especially by getting loans so that they can afford to buy that science and technology. Take an example. In most of schools in developing nations, teachers using chalkboards, compared to the Western nations, whereby those Western nations, they involve in the use of online studies and the use of projectors compared to other nations. So this show how most of the developing nations still there is a problem of rural science and technology. The third point is the high rate of infant mortality. In most countries of developing nations, there is a high rate of infant mortality. Infant mortality, this means that most number of children pass away or die at the age of 0 to 5 years. And these problems is due to the low supplies of health services in most of developing nations, whereby this led to the deaths of children, whereby it is inevitable because of the government to fail to provide social services like hospital and the other requirements. Point number 4 is raw gross domestic product. This raw gross domestic product is an indication of poverty in any nations. Take an example here in Tanzania. Today we are in the middle gross economic development, but still we have not developed enough because we are still depending on the Western nations to grant us loans so that we can build different infrastructures that could be used for transportation and the other economic developments. So, raw gross domestic product, it depends how the nations produce itself and not depending to the other nations. Example, in most of the African nations, still depending on the Western nations. So this shows how the raw gross domestic product is still low. Dear class, we jump to the point number 5, which is poor housing condition. Poor housing condition, this means it refers to the situation or the housing, the appearance of your home steady housing living conditions. As you see, in our societies, most of the houses is not beautiful and not conducive, but still we are living according to the situation because of poverty. Compared to the richest countries or to the rich person whom his or her house's condition is very nice. They have good houses, they are living good lives, they are spending conspicuous lives compared to the poor person whom cannot afford even to build a good house. So poor housing condition also is still an indication of poverty in the country. Point number 6, serious unemployment. This serious unemployment also is an indication of poverty in any nations. Take an example here in Tanzania. Most of the graduates are there at home and they are unemployed due to the low or to the narrow employment opportunities in the governments. So this to be eradicated, maybe the government should increase and improve in industrialization and the other sectors whereby the opportunity can be made so that people can get employment. Point number 7, economic independence of a country. This is still a problem in most countries. If any nations depend to other nations to get economic assistance, that is an indication of poverty. Because any nations to be independent should not depend from other nations. It should exploit and use and utilize the available resources for its economic development and not to depend for the external assistance. Point number 8, inadequate provision of social services. In most of our African nations, especially Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, Zimbabwe, and the other nations, there is inadequate provision of social services. That's why you can find that in the hospital there is no medicine, or in the society there is no health center, or there is no water supply, there is no clean water. So this is an indication that there is a poverty in that country. So my dear students, please and please, read and read so that you can understand it very well. That is the mark of the end of my session. Yes, my dear students, let us continue with the session. So let us see now about the causes of poverty in Tanzania. The first point is changing of weather and the climate. So changing of weather and the climate in the country, it may lead to the existence of poverty. How this may cause poverty. Change of weather and the climate, this led to the shortage of rainfall and disappearance of some species in the forest, whereby animal led to death, agriculture does not develop very well, so it led to the shortage of crops, cultivation and production. Second point is the low level of science and technology. So low level science and technology also is another factors which is led to the presence of poverty in the country. How this causes poverty? Low level of science and technology, example in agriculture, without the using of high technology like tractor for cultivation, pesticides for insecticides, it may lead to low production, so which led to availability of poverty in most of African families. Also there is poor economic plan. Poor economic plan. Poor government economic plan also led to the poverty in the country. This is due to the plan of producing a certain product while that product is available also in a certain place. So it's led to the fluctuation of price of the materials of the goods that is produced in each and everywhere. So this led to the poverty because that material that will be produced will be available in everywhere, where it will fail to get market. Also, there is disease and other natural calamities. Disease and natural calamities also it led to the poverty because the occurrence of natural calamities like earthquake, floods, and the other thing, it led to the poverty because it may lead to the death of the people, it led to the destruction of properties. So due to the destruction of properties, poverty exists in any community. Disease led to the loss of money power. So through the loss of money power, people do not involve in economic activities, example in agriculture. So this led also to poverty in any nations. Take an example, the eruption of COVID-19. COVID-19 killed a number of people and it led to most of the countries to ask for the demand of loans and other assistances, whereby now it led to the high debt of a country. So this is still a problem in most of African and other nations. Also there is population pressure. Also population pressure in the certain place, it may lead to the poverty because most people will not produce, other people will produce, but they produce the things is very low, but the consumption is very high. So you find that due to the comparison of the product and the number of people is very high and the production is very low. So it's led to the poverty because the demand is very high, but the production is very low. So that situation led to the poverty in the certain community. Lack of good governance. Lack of good governance also is another factors of poverty. How lack of of good governance may lead to the poverty. This is based on the leadership. If leadership is very poor, automatically even the development of a country will still at the lower level. So this is due to the poor leadership, which this leadership will be characterized with selfish, corruption, embarrassment, and the other misuse of national resources, whereby the very few will enjoy the available resources, but most majorities of the country will not enjoy the available resources. So therefore, poverty will exist in case of national level and the individual level in general. So, my dear class, this was some of the causes of poverty in the country. So, let us see the effect of poverty in our country. The first point is inability of the individual to get their basic needs. This is the effect or the impact of poverty in any nations. If there is a poverty, people cannot afford to get their basic needs like food, shelter, and clothes. Another is creation of dependent economy. This also is another factors. Example, referring to the lack of good governance. So if there is lack of good governance, the impact will be dependent from other developing nations in case of economy through getting loans and other assistance. So creation of dependence economy is another effect of poverty in Tanzania. High rate of death in the country. High rate of death in the country, how and why it is an impact or effect of poverty in Tanzania. This is due to the low supplies or lack of social services, example, clean water and a health center. So if there is a problem of health center in any country, automatically this high rate of death in the country will exist. Also, there is a high rate of illiteracy. High rate of illiteracy, how? The high rate of illiteracy is another impact of poverty in any nations. Because if a nation cannot afford to provide the social services like schools, high rate of illiteracy will be higher because most number of people or a large number of people will not attend to the school. Also, there is a high rate of crime in the country. The high rate of crimes in the country will exist because a large number of people are very poor. So, we decided to find money so that they can get their basic needs without looking which method they should use to get money. So, this also will exist. Also, there is an increase of illness. The increase of illness, this means, example, there will be availability of disease. Availability of disease. Like malaria. And the other diseases because of the government to fail to combat those insects that may lead to the spread of disease. Also, people will not engage in production. They could involve in other different activities that may lead to the happening of this illness. So, all in all, this has the impact or the effect of poverty in Tanzania. So, let us see the way how these problems can be solved. These are the way of reduction, general strategies for poverty reduction in Tanzania. How poverty can be eradicated or can be reduced in Tanzania or in any developing nations. The first is starting to change the education system. By changing the education system, this means that education that should be provided in school should be the education that will be productive after the graduates to graduate from the university. They will use that education to create employment opportunity and to create money. That is the change of education system. Second is promoting of the use of science and technology. Promoting of the use of science and technology. This also will increase production, whereby, example, by using tractors in agriculture, using of pests in killing insecticide in agriculture will lead to the increase of production of crops, hence poverty will be eradicated. Point number 3, control population pressure. Through controlling population pressure in a certain place, this will lead to the government to afford to provide all services compared to area where there is population pressure. Point number 4, changing of socialist economy to capitalist economy. Changing of socialist economy, this means will lead to the trigger or the driving force to the people for every person to struggle to fight and to produce himself and not to produce for each and any members. But the capitalist economy, it will lead to the reduction of poverty, because every person will be producing for his or herself. So this fifth, discouraging the traditional cultural and practices. So this traditional cultural practice also led to the eradication of poverty in the country, because like those people who are always during the morning want to pray Bao, want to making stories, so will change their minding and change their attitude and to engaging in production. So through that they will increase production, and therefore that problems will be solved. Point number 6, in the last and not least, women empowerment. So through women empowerment also in production and in other activities like political activities, cultural activities, and other productive activities, if women will be empowered, the production will be higher, and at the end poverty will be eradicated. Thank you very much, class, for listening. So let us see the question here to discuss and explain the way of combating poverty in the developing nations, like example in Tanzania. So after looking at that, we want to see this question, and everybody of you need to answer this question and to explain the ways of combating poverty in developing nations, example in Tanzania. And then you will read in your notes, then you will see everything, then you will write your assignment. Thank you very much for listening.